What's up, you guys? It's 2Bricks, and I'm back with the next installment of my Midi-scale droid series. In this series, we're going to be taking a look at all the different robots that I've made at the same scale, which is a fair bit smaller than LEGO's more UCS style of droids that they put out. So far, they've only done BB-8 and R2-D2 at any rate. So yeah, we're going to take a look at choppers, C1-10P and R2-D2, a couple of the most cantankerous astromechs in the galaxy. And for you guys who are new to the channel or new to the series, check out the other episodes. There's going to be a playlist over to the side here where you can see all the previous episodes I've done, and where I'll, of course, be uploading all future episodes as well. All right, so without further ado, let's take a look at some of the techniques and things that make these guys interesting. All right, so starting off with R2, of course, his head is fully rotatable 360 degrees. I'm using the same cap piece that I used for the eye on BB-8 to give it that exact kind of right proportion for the scale. His head is actually just attached very simply onto a turntable. You can see, oops, he's lost a leg. Oh boy, oh dear. All right, that's something I'm going to talk about in a little bit. You can see that I'm using some printed pieces under here that are just like ones that I don't have too much use for in my everyday building, so I just wanted to hide those away in there. Yeah, so the legs are actually only attached using this one stud plugged into a Technic brick, and the reason for that is just because when I use Technic pins, there isn't any friction that kind of helps to hold R2 up. So if I want to have a variety of different positions, there's enough friction in there that this will hold it together, and where if I don't mess with it too much, the legs aren't going to fall off. But when you start to handle it, that is one downside of using that attachment technique, is that you do get a little bit of the legs tending to want to pop off. So I have the kind of detail on the front here of the classic R2, what you would expect to see, with the little kind of folded in arms that can come out and do various things. He's got his different exhaust ports and things like that. I tried to call out all of the major areas of detail on his body where there's like a charging station and little vents and things like that. There's even a piece back here which I'm not really sure what that actually represents on R2. There's guys out there who just literally just build astromech droids for fun, so maybe they can call out if they know what some of these specific things are for. So for the legs, they're a little bit tricky in the way that they're built. I'm using these two Technic pins to attach this whole kind of front detail section, which itself is attached to some brackets on the side just to give a little bit more volume to the whole thing. And then that all kind of changes direction, changes orientation down here at the, I guess, wrist joint, where I'm using a bracket to then go upside down, and then I'm plugging in this T-bar piece into these rounded plates right here with the hole in them. Oh, there you go. And that just gives the full range of motion for the feet to be able to move around and kind of angle forward and back. And then on the inside of here, there's this kind of cabling detail on R2's feet, which I'm just representing with one of these bar pieces and just a plate sticking out, just to give you the kind of sense that there's that cabling detail in there. And then, yeah, again, just plugging this into the single stud back there is plenty enough to hold it in for just the display purposes. So we've got the third foot under here where, again, it's just plugged in using a T-bar into a couple of these rounded plates because they have the handy dandy hole in the middle. And then, yeah, the third foot on R2 is something that we've been missing out on for 2 decades now of LEGO minifig scale R2s. So of course the third foot has to be there if I'm going to do a larger scale version of that. Of course, though, many builders have found ways around that and have adapted their R2 minifigures to have the third foot in various ways, so that's cool. So R2's head is actually fairly complex. This bottom section is essentially just plates sandwiched on top of plates. That's fairly simple. And then on the inside here we have a whole set of brackets that are holding in the top right side up section of the head. That's these. And then I have in the 4 corners here these modified brick with modified bricks with studs on the side. Those just enable you to hold the front, back, and side panels in place. And then I'm just kind of transitioning the detail through by having the plates kind of overlapping on the sides here, and just sort of, it kind of in a similar way to how I did BB-8, just having all of the different angles meet up to kind of suggest a dome-like structure. So it was fairly tricky to figure out, but once I had the overall dimensions, which I took off of scaling it to BB-8, it was fairly simple to figure out exactly what the kind of size constraints were going to be, and to get this to all come together. Let me just see if I can pop this top section off to show you guys. There's a little bit of some tricky detailing on the inside as well. So you can see, like, to fill a couple of these gaps, I'm using like these little minifigure backpack bracket pieces to just fill in a little half stud gap in here, or a half plate thickness gap. And yeah, you can see there the brackets that are holding it in place that are a little bit offset. It's a really, R2 is a tricky design to get right, only because every side of him is totally different, and he's got that, like I said, a dome shaped head, which is not an easy thing to translate into Lego. I feel like this ended up working out pretty well overall. And taking a look at the construction of the body, if you peel off the bottom here, you can see same kind of thing. We're using brackets on their side, brackets upside down, and just lining them up, kind of in a similar technique to what I did for the Luke's lightsaber, or basically anything where you want to create a four-sided surface. You can just use these brackets, and if you remember the bracket plus 2 plates rule, you can get everything to line up pretty well. And then just each of the 4 sides is just attached onto those. And again, using the brackets all the way through to give it enough strength and stability to hold itself together. It's fairly simply achieved. And then just, capping off the bottom with these rounded plates, it just brings the whole thing together, I think. So yeah, that's R2, and he worked out pretty well. I think for one of the most iconic droids in the galaxy, you definitely have to get it right for R2. So it took me a fair amount of time to get all those details exactly how I want them, but yeah, I think it was worth it. So next up we have Chopper, and Chopper is a little shorter than R2, so he winds up having a more squat body, but he has a taller head section. So aside from the proportions, a lot of the kind of techniques are very much similar. Like, he has the same setup for the interior of his body with the brackets, and then these plates on the bottom holding everything together. He's using the same kind of setup with the brackets and everything that I used for R2, just with, again, slightly different proportions. The legs are attached in the same method, where it's just a stud jumper piece holding onto a Technic brick. You can see that the legs on Chopper are asymmetrical because one of them was salvaged from a different droid. Chopper's a very kind of slapped together kind of droid, and I think he's mad about it because he's always really angry. So part of that is that he's got like panels at off angles and things like that, and he's just very very much emblematic of the rebellion and their lack of resources, shall we say. He has this kind of exposed arm at the front, where in reality the whole thing should be able to hinge forward and grab stuff. And then he has these 2 retractable arms at the side, which he always uses to express his anger. He's always kind of waving those around. Grr. But I don't have it where they can actually retract in this model. They can just be removed. And so a lot of the times Chopper has just this more standard, let me get this off too. This more standard configuration where he doesn't have the arms poking out. But they come out a fair amount of the time, so I think, to me, I like seeing them in there. But I'm just using a couple of those brown modified plates with the little kind of rail off to the side, just to give the smallest possible gap on the side to accommodate the spot where those arms would go. Chopper, of course, also has an antenna on the top, which is something we don't see too much of in Star Wars, I feel like. Droids having just big old antenna like that. And then it's sort of a combined antenna / radar dish. And, with the head, I'm using, again, the same kind of techniques that I used for R2's head, but where I'm using, because the proportions are slightly different, I'm using the brickhead style of bricks to hold in one of the sides, and then just standard brackets again to hold in the other side there. But you know, again, it is just like one side, another side, each kind of meshing together in a kind of sphere-like structure. And you know, I just figured that out by just literally starting to put pieces together and figure out how to get something that looks roughly round and still be able to get all of the different features like the eyes in the appropriate places. But there's really no secret to that. Same thing here with just the single turntable for his neck or for his head rotation, and just a couple of like off-color pieces to help sell his kind of junker aesthetic. Oops. And yeah, Chopper winds up being a really iconic droid within the Star Wars fandom, just because he's so present throughout all of Rebels, and then he shows up in Rogue One as well. And oh, and instead of a third foot, he's got this big old wheel at the front here. And then something that I wound up, oh, sorry, I actually just realized this has been in the wrong spot this whole time. This is supposed to be right here. Something that Chopper has is that the big old wheel at the front here is retractable, and this is a rocket booster engine, and he actually can just straight up take off the ground using that. And you know, R2 had a little bit of a retroactive feature added in for the prequels where he could have little rocket boosters come out of his legs, but Chopper just straight up, his whole body is a rocket, so that's pretty rad. Yeah, and then if you want to kind of have him be in that configuration, you just can pull out this wheel and just pretend that that's the rocket booster engine right there. So that is Chopper. Fun little tidbit about Chopper, they actually revealed in the final ever episode of Rebels that he was voiced by Dave Filoni, the show's creator, which was something that I think had never been known up until that point. So that's pretty cool. So there are the two astromechs together. And in fact, I can bring in the other droids that I have so far and show you how they all scale together. So, you know, BB-8's a little shorter than these guys. And then we have our little fellows at the front, D-O, BD-1, and the mouse droid, who are even smaller still. And then, of course, if you kind of picture R2's roughly half human height, so that gives you a rough idea of how these guys all scale. Next up, we're going to be taking a look at C-3PO, who is human scale, so you'll be able to really get a better sense of that in that episode. So there you go, you guys. If you liked the video, I really appreciate the thumbs up. Subscribe if you're new to the channel, and you can check out all the other videos as they come out. And yeah, thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you next time, and may the Force be with you.